Hi, welcome to the Book Corner with me, Mish Atagana. Let's discover new worlds together. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Book Corner. I can't believe I did a season 2. You know, when I ended season 1, the whole thing was like, okay, now I've done one season of this podcast. Do I need to do another season? But I actually thought about it. You know, I love talking about these books. You guys know how I feel about fantasy. And I just don't know if there's a lot of book content in terms of like podcasts about fantasy or cozy ones like mine. But anyway, welcome back to the Book Corner with me, Mish Atagana. Season 2, and we're in a proper studio. Guys, this is no longer me sitting at my dining table and talking like crap to you guys. We're in a proper studio. Shout out to Spotify team for like hooking us up. And one of the things I wanted to do this season is just really make sure that I'm not just telling you guys about a book, but taking you guys through how, you know, the book made me feel, how I kind of thought about the world building and all this other stuff in the storytelling. So for season 2, I think it's going to be super interesting. I've read so many incredible books in the last couple of months, been to so many amazing places with all these books. So hopefully I'm taking you on a really exciting journey. So my first book for episode 1, I thought long and hard about this. And you guys know, if you're on my TikTok or my Instagram, you've seen that there's been so many books in the last couple of months. But I had to start off with Tomi Adeyemi and the Orïsha trilogy, which finally came to its epic end in June. So in June, Tomi released the final book in the series, The Children of Anguish and Anarchy, which we've all been waiting for. Anyone that's read these books, you know, by the time when we were in book 2, we had a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings about how Tomi was moving with this story. But here we are with a final book. So I haven't talked about Children of Blood and Bone or Children of Virtue and Vengeance in the last season. So I wanted to wait to talk about all 3 books together because I always prefer to talk about a series if it's completed. So the Legacy of the Orïsha trilogy, which I didn't even think this trilogy had a name until it was done. I was like, wait, it has a name? Okay, I guess. But these are published by Pan Macmillan, and they spanned from 2018, which is when the first book, Children of Blood and Bone, was released, to 2024, which is the last book, Children of Anguish and Anarchy. Into the world of this book, it literally centers around this young woman, Zélie. Zélie is a young girl who is cantankerous, will be one word to describe her. I think I would use to describe her. Actually, I see a lot of myself in Zélie. Like, her temper is out of this world. Yeah, I apologize to my friends. You guys know how my temper can be sometimes. But she's also someone who is on a quest for identity, on a quest to find her place in the world, right? She discovers, or not necessarily discovers per se, but her mom had this kind of magic. So there's a select group of their tribe that have white hair. And when you look at the covers, actually, I'm going to show you guys the cover. So this is like cover of Children of Blood and Bone. The white hair marks like the kind of the gut touched. I'm going to call them that because I don't want to give too much away in the book. Someone said to me, my podcast always give away too much in the book, but I'm going to call them like the gut touched, right? It means they have kind of a certain magical power, but they live in this world, which is kind of pre-colonial Lagos or pre-colonial Nigeria. And it's all about how they use they could use their magic, but their magic was taken away. So we begin the story with them not actually having magic anymore, but Zélie and her brother are trying to make sure that their father doesn't die. And it was like this whole thing around the world they live in. And the current king of their land, he hates these people with white hair who are these gut touch people. So there's constantly all these raids and they're constantly fighting for their lives. And every single time one of these raids happens, inadvertently someone gets hurt, inadvertently something gets destroyed, and these families have to rally. So our story really begins when Zélie and her brother go into Lagos to they're supposed to go sell I forgot what they were going to go sell. They were supposed to go sell something, and essentially Zélie and the prince of the land, they accidentally touch the scroll that ignites her powers. And this is kind of where our story takes off, where she now realizes her power has awakened, and there's like a whole fight that had broken out. Now they're on the run. And then they were like, let's rescue this random girl who turns out to be a princess. And now it's like a whole thing, and they're trying to figure out what they need to do and how they need to fix what's happening. Okay. So Zayli awakens this power. Now they've got this princess that they've got to figure out how to they rescued her, but it turns out she was just running away, and she's actually the reason this power got awakened, because she's the one that stole the scroll in the first place, right? So she stole the scroll, well, parchment, whatever the paper was that awakened the power. And then now, in order to save kind of everyone and everything, they have to go to this island that only appears once in a blue moon or at the end of dusk. It's a mystical thing, but it's like this mythical island. But the prince who literally keeps showing up in Zayli's dreams, because now they're connected somehow. Oh yes, I forgot about that. They're connected somehow. He keeps showing up in Zayli's dreams, and they get to this place, and Zayli taps into the power of her ancestors to kind of call on her, on her magic. But, and this is where we start in book 2, she calls on both lineage. So she calls on both her mother's lineage, which is the lineage of the Orïsha, with the white hairs, but she also calls on her father's lineage, who is a non-Orïsha lineage, which means magic gets awakened in people that didn't have magic before. So that becomes like a whole thing. Now in book 2, all these people who were chasing them, so the rulers of the land, so the king is dead. His wife is now in charge, who is this wicked queen who happens to be the mother of said princess and prince. Zayli and said princess now have a weird relationship, because said princess now has power that Zayli doesn't know how she feels about it. The prince, Zayli feels betrayed by him because there's a bit of a romance between them as well. But their power that this other people that didn't have power before have, it's so deadly that the Orishas are now under threat yet again, even though they have their power. So this becomes a real struggle back and forth. And what I quite find so fascinating is just the way Tomi brings in so many themes that you can kind of explore from history. So we have like the first kind of iterations of the Portuguese coming into Nigeria, where it gives you hints of like slave trades, like the ideas of slave trade becoming a thing. And then at the end of the book, we literally see the biggest betrayal of all, which is the fact that they have now been sold. So Zayli, her friends have been sold, but we don't know exactly to who or where, but all these Orishas, her brother, they're all like trapped in this boat. And that's where book 3 starts. They're trapped here, and now they're trying to figure out how to get out. It turns out, because when I first read that, I thought, okay, are we going to tell a story of, again, slavers selling them off to the West? But it actually isn't that. It's this person who actually wants Zayli's power. And his whole thing is collecting these very special people and collecting their power so he can become more powerful. I mean, typical men, but whatever. So they manage to somehow escape, and they go to this other island, which I thought was so interesting, because when I look at the Nigerian history, so for those of you that know, Lagos is actually named after Lagos, which is a Portuguese town. And there's also a lot of like Portuguese influence in the Yoruba language, which Tomi Adeyemi is a Yoruba woman. But this island that they go to is, I think of it, at least in my mind when I read it, it's a place in Nigeria called Badagry. I think that's what it's loosely based on, I think, because they speak Portuguese on that island. So the people of that island speak Portuguese. And I really like how we get introduced to another set of powers. So it's not just the magic that we're used to from the people of Lagos and Zayli and her tribe and her people. But when we meet these new people, they have a different kind of magic. They have a different kind of relationship with nature, with their world. And now all these people need to band together to go kind of fight this big bad. And it's really interesting the way it's been written, because I found that for me, the role that women play, because all our key heroes here are women, right? Yes, for sure. Zaylee's brother plays a really big role, and the prince in the end makes this really huge sacrifice in terms of just how he comes to redeem himself from Zaylee's POV. But it's really the women that we see their story told. Is the agency of women, is the power of women, is their kind of their bodies, the way they kind of claim their space in the world, equality, things like that is really addressed by Tomi here. So I really, really loved that. And I mean, the Nigerian in me obviously was losing my mind because it's like a story based on, part of my heritage. Even I feel even non-Yorubas can read this book and feel a sense of identity to it, because as someone who grew up reading Harry Potter, to read a story about a young Black woman that, looks like me, kind of in this world, working so hard to save not just her family and her friends, but an entire nation, and making sure that generations that come after her still have a voice and a power to keep this power. I think that's really interesting. And that's one of the things that just got me like super excited in the story. The idea of subjugation is looked at here, right? So if you think about the ruling class of Lagos and Zaylee's people, right? It's idea of like, because someone is different, they are either less than, or you're too afraid of what they are, that you subjugate them rather than learn from them. So I think that idea of subjugation is, quite prevalent here. I also feel that the way, even with Zaylee, when they kind of think about the Orishas and their magic and their powers, they also feel some sense of superiority to people without magic, in some ways. So whereas they are mostly the most prejudiced against, they also feel like, well, you don't belong, you don't understand. Kind of when they do get their magic back, they feel they kind of close ranks and don't include people a lot. So definitely, I think the real world themes around this division based on a physical difference or a mental difference does come through. So I look at it in the way we would look at gender divisions and race divisions and tribal divisions and things like that. I think that definitely comes through. I also think when we, in book 3, when we do meet these other people, just everybody kind of they don't understand each other, because they never did. The Zaylee and her people didn't even know the world beyond their little island and Lagos and the area that they're in. So for them to discover this island of these people with also magic that's different from theirs is very interesting to them, and it's a culture shock that they get. So I think that's also I quite like that the world opens up a bit, because the world was very closed in book 1 and 2, I felt, and the only other kind of ways we looked at the world was, there's the one character, which I forget his name, but I feel like the way he's described, he's European, right? But I can't tell if it's like, I think it's like either probably like a more like Portuguese European or French, maybe. I need to remember. So Zaylee is aware that other world, like things exist outside her world, but I don't think she believed that magic exists outside her tribe and her way of seeing magic. And for me, that inclusion in book 3 is very interesting to see. The world is much bigger. I feel like we're about to run out of time, and I'm still waxing lyrical about stuff. My favorite thing about this is just watching the way these characters grow and the way that the internal struggles they have. Allies become enemy at some point. Enemies become allies. But these are young people. I mean, I think Zaylee's was 16 or 17. These are kids. And these kids have the weight of the world on their shoulder. And we really do see them mature through it. We see them learn to kind of take away selfish desires in other to do what is best for the greater good, which, to be honest, is a lot to ask of a teenager in this scenario. So I really like the character growth that happened here. The world building, oh my goodness, the world building. It is so good. I'm not going to lie, book 2, I was just like, Tomi, I don't know what we're doing here. Can we just stop this? I'm so angry. But the world building is one thing I did not fault any of the books for. I thought the world building was so vivid, so exciting, so interesting. I could feel every grain of sand. I could feel every kind of skin crawl, every scorched moment in the story. So the world building was really vivid. And like I said, because it's situated in history, I could imagine some of where these places are, right? So anyone that spent kind of time in Lagos or understands a little bit of the history of Nigeria and the Portuguese will definitely, be able to kind of see the parts of the city or the parts of the country that could possibly be this place. So I really like that. I think writing books that are situated in almost like real world places that has a significant history that's just kind of almost flipped to give it a fantasy layer, it's always interesting for me. So I really love that. And I think in this season I'm gonna talk a little bit, a couple books that are that way. And then I also I loved that the use of language. So it wasn't just English. So you could hear, different kind of Nigerian languages pop through, like Yoruba, obviously, because Tomi is Yoruba and where we are is a predominantly Yoruba area. But like in book 3, like I said, there's bits of Portuguese that you can hear. You're like, oh, this is so interesting. So I really like that use of language that is situated in history as well. So I quite like that. I like that magic here is earned. So there's a birthright to magic, but there's also a way to earn it, right? So it's not easy. There's a cost to doing the magic. There's a deep connection to one's ancestry and one's history and one's story and oneself to achieve magic at the level that was needed to save the world, or their world in this case. So I really like that magic is not easy, and because often you find in some of these stories, the magic may be easy, but it doesn't feel, if there's no cost to it, the wins don't feel as good. So I really like that magic wasn't easy here. And then just one thing that, if you look at, so this is Children of Blood and Bone. This is the first book where we get introduced to this idea of the white hair. And when you read the story, you then understand why they have the white hair. Then this is like, Children of Virtue and Vengeance, where Zaylee's hair is a lot different. And in the stories, all Zaylee's hair changes in the way that the stories gets told. Even, what is the princess's name? Amina, I think. And then this is the final book, and Zaylee now is in braids. And I think it tells the story. It kind of helps the reader understand a little bit her journey, and what kind of story she's about to have based on the kind of hair that she has, right? Because this is a young woman on the cusp of discovery. This is a young woman at the midst of battle, or trying to figure out how to do battle, and this is a young woman deep in battle, about to lose, and literally she's ready for war. And I think it's really, really great the way that Tomi's team kind of did that cover design. How did this books make me feel? This is super. How did these books make me feel? I definitely was okay with the ending. It was not I think in the so those of you who saw the TikTok or the IG post on these books that I did back in June when I read them, is I said the ending was a satisfactory one. Not that it was a bad ending or anything, but not we didn't win in every place, right? It was a bittersweet ending. I think our heroes managed to achieve what they set out to, but there was a great cost to that achieving it. And I think it made Zaylee a woman ready to lead, right? In that sense. So how did it make me feel? I felt good. It felt a little like life. Life doesn't always end the way you want it to, but we still got a bit of a win. Look, to be fair, we actually got a decent win. We got a decent win. The thing that didn't end up, which I don't want to give away because I don't want to be accused. Janice, I'm looking at you. I don't want to be accused of giving away the whole thing. But the thing that didn't work out the way it should have, I'm actually okay with that. I think that made sense because there was a lot of characters in the story that needed to have a redemption moment, and redemption does not come easy. Redemption comes at a cost, right? So I felt good. I think I felt good about the ending. Yeah, but generally, the story felt, especially the first book. The first book is my favorite of the lot. Children of Blood and Bone is such a good book. It is such a fantastic story. It is my favorite book of the trilogy, and it is such a powerful story. And it made me feel so powerful reading it and thinking about also just for Tomi, because when she was writing this, she was also quite young when she first started writing this. I think she was in her early 20s, maybe, when she wrote the first book. There's just the creativity and just the rawness of the storytelling was so good in the first book. So for me, that book always makes me feel so powerful when I think about it. Book 2, I didn't love as much. I was so angry. I'm not gonna lie. I was actually really upset with book 2 because I just felt that there was such exquisite potential to the story that I wasn't even sure where we were going with book 2. So I felt very much let down by it. But book 3 really brought it home. So I feel that in the end, it really tied well together. So I'm super grateful that Tomi took her time to kind of finish the series properly in that way. So I really love that. Yeah, I definitely love that. The way they made me feel is so important. Like when I think of, again, back to Children of Blood and Bone and how powerful it made me feel, I think, Tomi in a lot of conversation around writing the story has talked about, women's bodies. So there's some notes here that wonderful producer Mohale made for me. And it talks about, I think she also talks about the fact that Roe v. Wade was repealed, right? And the persecution of women in Brazil and all of these things, which I also found to be so interesting, because if you also look at where Tomi is from, a country like Nigeria, actually just Africa in general, where for sure we as women feel we have agency, but that agency often is under the guise of patriarchy, right? Where we may have ownership of our own bodies, but that ownership of that body is often questioned by the patriarchy or men based on the male gaze. So things like that, I thought, from at least from a fantasy lens, just the way, again, back to the way she allowed women to just own their story, and when they weren't allowed to own it, they took it by force. And I think that's so important for young women, just when they read this. But I also think I want to see more of this on fantasy, and I'm working so hard to read more fantasy that really focuses on things like this, where you have these strong female characters that are just taking ownership of who they are and what they want and what they do, as opposed to their world being defined by others. So for me, that's super interesting. I also really hope that, I know they're making a movie of these books. I really hope that because Tomi is working on these books, that it is well handled and all of this translate, especially for young Black girls, because this is an African story that is this is a New York Times bestseller book about a young African girl with magic having her Harry Potter moment. And I think there's something so significant about that we have to remember. So I do hope when they do make, I can't remember who's making this movie. I want to say Paramount. I can't remember. But I hope that it is handled with the care and the respect that it deserves. So that when young women in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Kenya, Ghana, Tunisia, wherever they are, young African women watch it, or they really see themselves represented in it, and are inspired to pick up the book and read it. So, and I think that's it, guys. We have come to the end of this conversation. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. And I hope you guys read these books. Like I said, Children of Blood and Bone is my favorite, but it's a really good trilogy and is definitely worth the read. I really, really would love you guys to support this podcast. So pretty please follow it on Spotify. Go to Books and Sneakers and follow on TikTok and tell me what books I should be reviewing. And that's it. See you next time.